February 1st, 2024. At 5:52 p.m., a resident called 911 to report a burglary in progress. The resident told dispatch he was calling from a nearby fire station and not from his apartment. The intruder and the resident exchanged a series of communications, which included the intruder threatening to go to the resident's apartment to take his belongings. As dispatch requested units to the location, an officer who happened to already be in the complex realized he was only 600 feet away from the apartment. Exiting his police car only 22 seconds after he was dispatched, the officer makes his way towards the apartment with his firearm drawn, where he notices the apartment door ajar.
Show me your hands! Show me your hands! Bring your hands over here! Show me your hands! Show me your... Shots fired! Hey, so I got one down. Shots fired. Show me your hands! Show me your hands! Who are you? Who are you? Visitor, get up, come over here. Come show me your hands. In the apartment, roll them, roll them. You on the ground. Do you live here? Do you live here?
No.
Why are you in here?
That's my cousin's house.
Who is he?
That's my brother.
What the officer didn't know is that the individuals inside the apartment were not burglars and instead roommates and a visitor of the caller. The roommate suffered a gunshot wound to the head and did not survive. As the officer enters the apartment, the person he believes is a suspect walks towards the kitchen sink where the officer hears a clunk sound. It was later determined by crime scene investigators that the roommate had dropped a 9mm Glock 43X into the sink. The officer stated as the roommate turned rapidly away from the sink to face him, he had his arms at chest level. It's this movement that causes the officer to engage. After the shooting, the brother of the now victim appears from the back room. During the search and medical evaluation of the roommate, a polymer 80 handgun was recovered from the roommate's right jacket pocket. The victim did not have a weapon in his hands when he was shot. Turns out there was an intruder who was observed on camera loading belongings of the victims into his vehicle. The suspect was seen pulling out of the complex as the officer was parking his vehicle. The Attorney General's office determined the officer acted reasonably given the facts and circumstances he was aware of at the time. The report cited that the officer had no reason to believe anyone other than the suspect was present in the apartment. Per the officer's training, priority calls are generally considered high-risk situations and the officer must maintain the tactical advantage. The officer believed he had the tactical advantage over who he thought was a burglary suspect, but he indeed did not. Once the officer entered into the apartment, he exposed himself to angles he either did not cover or could not reasonably cover by himself. Had this been a real burglary with armed suspects, the officer could have found himself in a catastrophic situation. At best, the suspect could comply and not engage the officer, or at worst, shoot the officer as he lays there waiting for backup. By entering the apartment and closing distance on the victim, the officer created a more confusing and chaotic situation while reducing his reactionary gap. This limited the officer's ability to think, make a decision, and react to the situation. It's these reasons why entering a structure by yourself during a burglary call without any known or perceived threat to life is not what officers are trained to do. In fact, what's taught is to hold position at the point of entry, wait for backup, and establish a perimeter if you think there is indeed a burglary occurring. The officer did notify dispatch when he arrived on the call, but didn't get on the radio again until after the shooting. As an officer approaching this situation, what you should do once you find the apartment is assess the point of entry and notify dispatch. Whether the door is open, closed, ajar, or you observe obvious signs of forced entry, it is all relevant information for responding officers. While you're already near the door, you can use this time to listen for anything out of the ordinary. This may allow you to gather more information which can assist you with further decision making. After assessing the door, the officer should have established a position of domination here where he's away from the front of the door but can still see it. These actions provide you with time, distance, and a level of cover while you wait for additional officers. If and when the time comes to work the door, the primary officer can do that from here, as the secondary officer covers down inside the room from here. Utilizing this tactic, two officers can clear the majority of the room from the outside before ever making entry. If you stand directly in front of a door when you open it, it might be the last thing you ever do. Instead, use the space you have available to you to offset yourself from the threshold. Not only are you making yourselves an easier target visually by standing directly in front of the door, but we're also not giving those rounds that may be coming at us any chance to deviate before they get to us. Pointing out that walls are not cover isn't all that helpful when we have to use what we have in the moment to our advantage. There is a reason that concealment has been taught since the beginning of modern warfare as something that you can utilize to your advantage when you otherwise have no other options. So we will utilize the sides of the thresholds when it is available and for us to do so. So in that situation, with this door propped open, and it does become time and appropriate for us to work the door, you could utilize your hand to push on the door here. That's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. I prefer to maintain a little bit more standoff from the threshold itself so that I can not only mitigate rounds that may be coming through the door, but rounds that may be hitting the threshold or the wall close to the threshold in conjunction with them trying to shoot at the door. So what I would do is I would brace myself up against the wall, focus on that hard corner, and then work the door in that way. In a situation where you have to reach across the door instead of working the door from the knob side, I like to utilize a method they call letting the door breathe. So I would get into position where my body is away from the front of the door, lean over towards the doorknob, and when I go to work the door, I'm not actually pushing the door all the way open, because if I do that, I'm leaving myself exposed to this area here, and I can't reasonably cover that area in a timely manner. And I also want to attempt to get a reaction from somebody inside the room who may be looking at the door and waiting to shoot. So what I would do is I would reach across, work the door, watch the door, wait to see if we get a reaction, look and listen. Do we hear anything? Do we see anything? And then again, when it becomes time to work the door after we let it breathe, brace myself up against the wall, utilize my foot, and then open the door all the way from there. Another mistake that we see that officer making is he starts at the threshold with two hands on the gun, but as soon as he sees somebody, he transitions his support hand to his handheld flashlight while he also has a weapon light mounted to his handgun. This is a common mistake see officers make not only with their light, but with their radio in their hand. Instead of using a lapel mic, they actually have their radio in their hand, and you're simply handicapping yourself. We want to always try to keep two hands on our gun whenever we can, and the only times that I can see it's appropriate to shoot one-handed is in an act of desperation. So we're fighting somebody, trying to get them off of us, and therefore we don't have our support hand available to us, or if we're injured. Otherwise, if we have a weapon light on our handgun, we want to utilize that however you utilize your weapon light, and become familiar with how you do that and when you do that, and I don't think that this officer is. Now, I won't go as far as to say that this was potentially a negligent discharge. I'll leave it up to you, but I don't believe that that officer hit that individual in the head with one round, because that officer is highly skilled at tactics or highly skilled at shooting. And I believe that for two reasons. One, we don't train to deliberately only shoot people in the head. We train to shoot in the A zone and maybe hit the C zone, because aim small, miss small. If we're aiming for a small portion of someone's body, there's just a higher likelihood that we'll miss versus aiming for more of that person's body, which is the A zone or the C zone. And so we don't deliberately shoot at the head unless there's some reason for us to do that. He also, when he engages, he has his handgun pointed out and sideways, and he's not actually looking through his sights at all, which I understand this is a point, technically maybe a point shooting situation, but the way that he's holding his handgun tells me he's unfamiliar with just an overdevelopment of the fundamentals of marksmanship. He was not trained to shoot his handgun that way, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't train to shoot his handgun that way. And so all of those things factor in to leading me to the idea that he probably, or most likely, struck that individual purely based on luck versus having some high level of skill.